November 15th, 1942. The Pacific was a void. No moon, no horizon, no light. Just the low heartbeat of engines pushing the battleship Kirishima through black water. On her bridge, Captain Sanji Iwabuchi trusted in the finest optics Japan had ever built, rangefinders polished like jewels. His crew, disciplined and precise, stood ready. They believed the night belonged to them. But somewhere beyond that black curtain, something was watching. For 7 long minutes, another giant, the USS Washington, had been silently tracking Kirishima. Not with eyes, but with radar. Invisible waves pulsed through the void, bouncing off steel, painting an unseen picture of distance, speed, and bearing. Inside Washington, a mechanical brain, the Mark WWII fire control computer, was crunching numbers faster than any man alive. At 100 hours, Captain Willis Lee gave a quiet order. "Open fire!" A second later, the night tore open. 16-inch shells, each the weight of a small car, screamed through the darkness. The first salvo found its mark, then another, and another. Within minutes, Kirishima's guns fell silent. Her rudder jammed. Flames crawled up her decks, turning steel into light. By 3:25 a.m., she rolled and vanished beneath the sea. Her surviving crew were convinced they had hit their enemy. They hadn't. Washington never took a single shell. She had appeared out of nowhere, fired with machine-like precision, and disappeared again into the void. Japan had just seen the future, and it looked nothing like the past. For decades, Japanese naval power had been built on perfection. Their torpedoes, the oxygen-fueled Long Lance, were engineering masterpieces. Their lookouts could identify a ship's silhouette from miles away. They believed victory came from discipline and flawless execution. And for a time, they were right. But while Japan perfected the old, America was quietly inventing the new. Back in the 1930s, inside the Naval Research Laboratory, American scientists were playing with an odd phenomenon: ships reflecting radio waves. What began as curiosity became the seed of radar. By 1940, the battleship USS New York had fired her guns guided entirely by those invisible signals. It was crude, but revolutionary. Admiral Ernest King saw what others missed. Radar wasn't a gadget, it was a nervous system, and he intended to wire it into the heart of the U.S. Navy. To do it, America unleashed something Japan could not match: its industrial brain. MIT's radiation laboratory, the Rad Lab, became a fortress of innovation. More than 4,000 scientists worked day and night, producing over 100 radar systems in just 3 years. Mark 8 for surface fire, Mark 12 for tracking, Mark 22 for anti-aircraft defense. Each was refined, tested, and mass-produced before Japan could even finish a prototype. The US built an ecosystem where science flowed into industry overnight. Japan's research, brilliant but fragmented, stayed trapped on paper. Their engineers chased perfection. America chased results. By mid-1942, the USS Washington's radar could track targets at 25,000 yards through fog, rain, and total darkness. Japan's best units were still waiting for final testing. Perfection had become paralysis. When Washington met Kirishima, the battle was already decided, not by skill, but by systems. The American commander, Rear Admiral Willis Lee, wasn't just a naval officer. He was a marksman, a scientist, a believer in the invisible. While others doubted radar's reliability, Lee trusted it with his life. That night, his faith was rewarded. Radar saw what eyes could not. In 7 minutes, a 36,000-ton battleship ceased to exist, and not a single American gunner had actually seen their target. In Tokyo, confusion turned to disbelief. Lieutenant Commander Toshi Omi reviewed every report. The patterns were undeniable. Americans always fired first, from farther away, and with impossible accuracy. His analysis concluded the US radar was 2 years ahead of Japan's. He was ignored. By the time his superiors realized he was right, the gap had doubled. By 1943, American destroyers carried radar systems more advanced than anything aboard Japan's most powerful battleships. Fire control computers, those analog mechanical minds, calculated range, bearing, and motion in real time, adjusting for wind, ship movement, even the curvature of the Earth. When a salvo missed, radar read the splash, corrected instantly, and fired again. The human element, the weakness of sight, reaction, fatigue, was being engineered out of the equation. War had become mathematical, and the results were devastating. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea in 1944, radar blanketed the skies. Japanese Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa launched over 400 aircraft, hoping to surprise the American carriers. But the moment his planes took off, American screens lit up. Aboard the Lexington and Enterprise, fighter directors vectored waves of F-6F Hellcats straight into the path of the Japanese strike groups. The result was carnage, later called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Of 373 attacking planes, 346 never returned. Not one US carrier was hit. Japanese pilots later said it felt like being hunted by an enemy they could not see, an enemy that always knew where they were. They weren't wrong. Then, the Americans unveiled another secret: the proximity fuse. Inside every anti-aircraft shell was a miniature radar, programmed to detonate when it came near a target. The first time it was used, Japanese pilots swore they were shot down by invisible guns. It was radar again, this time flying at supersonic speed. By 1944, American factories were producing 100,000 of these fuses a month. Japan could barely make one that survived the shock of firing. That year, Admiral Nishimura's task force sailed into the Surigao Strait, unaware that radar eyes were already watching. 6 US battleships waited, their guns pre-aimed on coordinates they'd never seen. When the Japanese entered range, radar-guided salvos reduced them to fire and fragments. Not one American ship was visible to the enemy. Darkness, once Japan's greatest ally, had become its executioner. By the war's end, the difference wasn't just in numbers, though the numbers were staggering. America had built 28 fleet carriers and 377 destroyers, but it wasn't quantity that crushed Japan. It was connection. Each American warship was a node in a living network, radar, radio, and information fused into a single intelligence. A combat information center could see hundreds of miles in every direction, guiding planes, guns, and fleets as one organism. Japan's mighty Yamato and Musashi, the largest battleships ever built, were monuments to a dying philosophy. Their rangefinders were optical. Their radar, bolted on as an afterthought, couldn't even guide their guns. They were masterpieces of a world that had already ended. By 1945, the US Navy no longer feared the dark. It was the dark, the silent predator that saw everything and revealed nothing. Japan's navy, built on human vision, was destroyed by an enemy that didn't need eyes. A Japanese commander, Toshi Omi, reflected later with painful clarity. Japan had fought a 1941 war against a 1944 enemy. And that gap, not courage, not spirit, not even ships, had decided everything. The radar pulses that sank the Kirishima were more than echoes in the night. They were the first heartbeat of a new kind of warfare, where the mind of man merged with the machine, where precision replaced instinct, and where empires no longer fell to armies, but to the speed of innovation. That night in November 1942 wasn't just a battle. It was the moment the world crossed into the age of electronic war. And from that moment on, the darkness would never belong to Japan again. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that changed history. See you next time.